Hi everyone, welcome. I think we'll get started, given that it's gone 1 o'clock and we have an exciting lecture ahead of us. So I want to leave as much time as possible to hear from Diran. Firstly, just thank you for joining us for the second lecture in the Queering Urbanism series. My name is Jordana Ramallo. I'm a lecturer in development planning for diversity at the Bartlett Development Planning Unit. My other colleagues, I'll allow them to introduce themselves.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Claire Tunnicliffe. I'm a part-time PhD student at the Bartlett School of Architecture and a part-time grant maker at Give Out, a community foundation raising funds for LGBTQI activism.
Welcome from me as well. My name is Ben Campkin and I'm Professor of Urbanism and Urban History in the Bartlett School of Architecture and one of the co-directors of UCL's Urban Laboratory. So we're really delighted to welcome you all to this second event in an online lecture series, Queering Urbanism, which has been initiated by Be Queer, the Bartlett Faculty of the Built Environments Network for LGBTQIA+ students, staff and allies. Before I say something about the series, we wanted to note today the context at UCL, which is that although it's LGBT History Month in the UK and there's a programme of events happening in the university, there's also a conflict happening around the University Management Committee's recent decision to withdraw from the Stonewall Diversity Champions Programme and Workplace Equality Index against the advice of its EDI committees and the LGBT advisory groups. So as researchers engaged in the field of queer urbanism, we challenge the process through which this decision has been politicised and taken, and also the quality and evidence underpinning the paper that was submitted to UCL's academic board. And we note that this specifically involves the discussion of issues around queer space. So we've signed the petition along with about 6,500 others for UCL to rejoin these schemes. So as the organisers of Queering Urbanism, our intention for this series is to draw connections between queer and trans studies, urban studies and urban practice. And our aim is to provide a space for sustained discussion of queer inclusive urbanisms that will bring forward speakers and evidence from a variety of contexts. We're interested in exploring how theoretical and methodological invention from queer and trans studies and activism inform or could inform urban studies and urbanism. There is, of course, a long history of urban geographies of sexuality going back to the 1960s. But today, mediated by technology, there's also a resurgence of interest in queer space and place and a globalized discussion around queer activisms, even while the terms in use are varied and context specific, as of course queer subjectivities are in their diversity. We very much want to address these complexities, and we're very excited to be able to learn from our guest speaker today, Dr. Diran Barisa, who will be speaking to the title of Peripheral, Desires of Ephemeral Cities, Imagining Queer Geographies in India. Before I introduce Dr. Barisa, just to explain that the format will be a talk for around 35 minutes, followed by a short Q&A. The event is being recorded and we encourage you to post comments and questions using the Q&A function. The time is of course tight, but we'll do our best to get through the questions. And we hope that the discussions will continue to unfold through this series. And if you're using social media, you can use the hashtag Queering Urbanism. So to introduce our speaker, Dr. Diran Barisa is a Dalit queer activist, poet, and urban sexual geographer, and is currently employed at Jindal Global Law School as an assistant professor. He's also an honorary visiting fellow at the School of Geography, Geology, and Environment at the University of Leicester. Diran attained his PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi on queer cartographies of desires in Delhi, and through research which engages with sexual mappings and makings of cities from an intersectional and decolonial lens, both among queer spaces in India and in diasporic queer worldings. So I'm really delighted to hand over to Dr. Barisa with a very warm welcome.
Thank you so much for this warm welcome and generous invitation to make me part of this wonderful series on queering urbanisms. And to start with, because cities are texts and cities are stories, what I would be doing is I would be weaving a bunch of stories to think about what does city mean to its varied inhabitants, especially the many, many people who come to the city hoping the city is their home, but have a love-hate relationship with it. Is the city only the way in which we are understood and taught in urban theory, a very coherent form of lived space, or is it messy? Is it only about capitalist relations and class divisions, or is it about also sexuality? Are cities sexual as well? What is sexy about the city? But also, more importantly, if cities are sexy and cities want to be sexy all over the world these days, they want to compete with one another, who gets to be sexy in the city? The talk will try to engage with, can we then use sex as an archive to understanding urbanism, urban lives, and the way in which we somehow nicely, somehow difficultly live in urban cities. I'll start with something which is central to the way in which we have come to understand cities. Like, what way in which we can say city has become queer is when you have a big pride parade happening where there's a bunch of people in vivacious colors, they're marking the city, like you claim the city for that moment. And as more and more cities across the world, from smaller towns, are getting into this spirit of throwing pride parades, I want to talk about what is beyond that glamour of that pride. Those 2 hours stretch of motion from one point A to point B in the city, a designated stretch of area where you think that finally you have been somehow able to claim the city. I'm taking you first to a picture from the Delhi Queer Pride. With all that glamour, all that glitter, all those musical sounds and dancing cheerful numbers. But more than the glamour of the pride, what I want you to witness is something which is in the little map, which is adjoining in that same slide. This is where the Delhi Queer Pride starts. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we haven't had pride parades for some time. But this is the intersections near the Barakhamba metro station at the Tolstoy Mark. It's where people collectivize and in the bustle of the city's life, claim the city through the pride parade. But what I want to focus upon is this tiny box. It's a public toilet just next to where the pride parade starts. And before the 2-hour-long stretch starts, I want to think about what is happening in this public toilet. For many people who can't afford to wear fancy designer dresses and go and buy expensive Zara clothes in order to come into those spaces and feel free and liberated and queer, many hide from their homes, pack and shove in their bags little dresses, makeup kits, and use this little box of a public toilet and turn it into a dressing room. People are helping each other pleat saris and tucking them in, putting lipstick on each other, some eye makeup, some glitter. And that is where I want to start the conversation today, that while across the world, we are saying which pride parade was the biggest pride parade, I want to emphasize for many who can't afford in their everyday lives, but want to claim the glamour of the pride, the vivaciousness of the pride. This is where the pride is. For the short duration of time before the pride has commenced, the little public toilet transforms itself into this world for so many who cannot dress up from their homes and come to the pride parade. But many meanings that it can envision, it can claim. Pride in Delhi ends at a site which is designated site, a site which is designated for protests. The government, for the sense of surveillance, control, has designated site that all the protests will happen here. And this is the very spot, starting from the point of that near that public toilet, it's where the pride culminates. But this is also the site where so many different things are happening simultaneously. There are farmers far south of the country have migrated to protest for the unfair laws and the kind of devastation they have to face in terms of indebtedness. protesting in terms of performatively eating rats, drinking their own piss. Or there's a mother with a post with a picture of her son, a Dalit son who was institutionally murdered in a university, because as many who want to claim the city, claim education, cannot claim. Or there are women's rights marches, or queers who want to do the Pride Parade. All of this happening simultaneously. From the public toilet and what's happening there in the public toilet, of how pride starts, to here, which so much is happening simultaneously in the cityscape, from farmers protesting to anti-caste resistance to women's rights marches and to queer revolution. The question that I want to raise and start with is, then how does one read queerness itself? Who is queer here and who is not queer? Because all of these who have been pushed into this tiny space to protest and raise their voice of injustice that they face are all queer and all messing the very logic of the way in urban spaces are produced and created. They happen simultaneously. They are coexisting and creating a world. On your screen is a screenshot from Grindr. Grindr, which is a popular gay dating app. And on the screen, you could see multiple things happening. It's the map of the Delhi metro. It connects the entire city. It has made the city approachable. You can hold the city together. You can move from one part of the city to another. The way in which people would never previously imagine city to be like. Cities ever growing. And how this metro map connects you to the city. But this metro map is on a Grindr profile picture of somebody. Somebody who also identifies itself with a name as a top Jat boy. Jat is a dominant caste identity, trying to assert both in this map a claim to the city, but a claim to a caste identity which would allow them a particular form of desirability in the city. How the city is available in this era of technology-driven relationships, in the era of mobile technology, which makes you mobile for moving from one place to another, that how desire is so interwoven within the very transport arteries of the city, how the cities are made and constituted with queerness. I want to talk about dancing. When I was growing up, my mother would never let me dance. She thought I danced like a girl. My mother worked as a domestic help, my father a waiter. So every time they'd gone out to work and I was back from school in that single room house that we called home, with 2 beds, a small table, a black and white television set, I would switch on the television, play out a Mujra song, take out my mother's dupatta, wear it around and dance. Inhi logon ne le li inha dupatta mera. These very people have taken away my scarves. The picture to your left represents the courtesan culture, the culture of dancing, culture of rejoicing, the way in which several cities had these hubs where rich aristocrats and feudal lords would have courtesans dance for them. Fast forward to that, cities have also come to allow us to dance. In the words of famous anarchist feminist, we will dance and bring revolution. If I can't dance, this is not my revolution. I take you to stories of dancing, cruising, and the era of the digital dating apps to try to think about how does the city open up possibilities of sexual geographies. This beyond the imaginations of the global gay city, where the city centers and the neighborhoods and gay bars have traditionally represented what gay cultures represent. I want to foreground, what does it mean if you are at the periphery of the city? Not just at the far end of the city's physical proximities, or what city finds it unwanted and dirty and filthy areas where poor people live, where unwanted people live, but necessary for the circulation and creation of the city. I want to think about people who are the social peripheries. Queers that could also be the farmers who are protesting in the slide that I showed earlier. Queers who are also at the also lower caste and from working class backgrounds, but also aspire to belong and claim this city. Queers who during the COVID-driven pandemic could be one of those many migrants who had to walk thousands of miles in the country when the country was put on lockdown without any state support, but rather penalized for being working class, being migrants to the city. If cities are also produced through these migrants, if cities are produced through the many people who might not necessarily be rich, cannot afford the lavishness and comforts of the luxuries of the neighborhoods and the global gay imagination, how does city welcome them? How do they embrace the city? How do they claim the city beyond those pride parades? How do they make that city? Is what I want to emphasize upon. On the left, on the right on the screen is a picture of a club which has now come to mean so much for gay people. It has become a gay bar, sort of. But many places in Delhi do not have designated areas. Clubs keep on shifting from one place to another. For one night to another night, different locations become queer. Before Section 377, the colonial era law was read down by the Honorable Supreme Court, police would abruptly enter into many of these club spaces, start recording, create a disruption in those spaces where people start hiding. But these clubs are also of different kinds. Clubs through the practice of what kind of music is played, what kind of aesthetics is welcome, or what kind of charges that they apply, how expensive or affordable they are. They create a hierarchy of queer lives. Not everybody, like me, who wanted to dance in the tiny room of his house as growing up, as seeing in the urban city spacescape, the bigger city, a possibility to dance and be free, can neatly be free. These are where most of the parties happen, mostly in South and Central Delhi. But the question that I want to talk about is, what happens if you are at the peripheries of the city? Is the question only about the physical distance that you have to navigate? Or is it also about the social and economic distance that you have to navigate in order to be part of these spaces? Not everybody is part of these parties. Not everybody is readily welcome into these party spaces. Let me tell you a story. A party was happening in one of the Saturday nights in one of the center of the city, Connaught Place. It was a cheaper party. A cheaper party would then entail a larger diversity of people can come and participate, enjoy, and dance to the music. The music is Bollywood music, unlike the party space that I showed earlier, where electronic dance music is played. It is a 5-star hotel, so a lot of people feel uncomfortable in entering that space. There's a lot of anxiety involved in this space. What I want to also spell out is how these spaces of desires that are being constructed in the name of queerness then also become geographies of anxieties for so many people who attempt to belong to the spaces, but given the social locations, their histories, fail to readily claim those spaces. In one of the parties, which was cheaper, where larger diversity could come, because just by the virtue that the price tag was less, a lot of Kotis and trans people were also present. Many people who would take autos from their homes would use the same autos or rickshaws and the rear view mirrors as the last spot to touch up their makeup before they enter into the party venue. The party is crowded. It's a small clustered space. There's not much you can move, but people are happy. People are dancing. There's sweat. There's alcohol. There's music, and people are enjoying. The sound of the music is suddenly disrupted. It's suddenly disrupted by a hijra thali. Hijras are live in communities. They have been traditionally seen as who have a mother figure, a guru, who work in terms of the teacher-disciple system, mostly engaging in sex work and begging activities, but are distributed and traditionally accepted social category. But they have a language. So when they clap, that clap is a signal. It's a language to tell whether they are joyous or in danger. And suddenly, the dancey music of the club space is disrupted by the sound of one such clap. A trans person who had just gone to the washroom was stopped by a hypermasculine subject who by the virtue of their cisgender appearance and the gym-toned body, felt that they could claim everybody in that space. They tried touching this trans person in offensive manner, which they refuse, they reject. And in response to that refusal and rejection and trying to protect themselves, they start clapping, indicating everybody else from that community who is there in that party space that they are in danger. Suddenly, everybody starts moving here and there in that party space. People come to rescue a bouncer from the club, which is there to maintain the sanctity of the space, the sacredness of the space, which is about dancing and music for the queerness to survive that night, asks the trans person to vacate that space. The trans people leave that party space, go down, climbing down the stairs, open on the road in middle of the city. Next to this club is a McDonald's. McDonald's usually are open till 2 a.m. in the night, early morning. This trans person, at the hand of this man who was trying to be offensive to her, is disrobed and is not wearing a single cloth, trying to hide and preserve her body. Everybody else in that party space that surrounded that scene, nobody interjecting. The organizers of the party run away. Police is called. A fear is circulated. The police is soon going to come and crush down this party. The McDonald's, which is just next to, pulls down his shutter halfway. The McDonald's in that very moment represents familial space. It's family time. Families are eating burgers inside. And what is happening outside in this display of nudity, in display of offense, of violence, is something that they want to create a distance from. This is the distance they want to create between the heteronormative family inside and the vulgarity of the queerness that is presented outside, without speaking about the violence that is taking place here. Police soon comes in, picks up every trans and Koti person who's there, does not touch a single cisgendered queer person who was also partying in that nightclub, who was also celebrating their queerness. Knowing very well who would have resources to combat that assault, who would have resources to then question and free themselves. And trans people and Kotis are then seen as easy targets in that very moment, telling us that if cities are trying to be, and Delhi, for one instance, is trying to be a world-class city, and a world-class city with liberal imagination, where queerness can be lived so freely and flamboyantly, who gets to be queer in the city, who gets to dance in the city, and who gets penalized for dancing, for just being in that city. Many people who come to this dance floor to dance from peripheral areas try to create friendship networks so that in case they have to go back in the night, they can share the fare to go back to the places. There are times when people would be scorned or questioned that weren't you wearing the same clothes in the last party I saw? Humiliated. The sites of desires, which are sexual and oozing sexual energies, are also sites of humiliation and reminder for many, many different kinds of queers who want to inhabit and claim and aspire this global gay aesthetic, that they can only do it in riskiness. They can only do it ephemerally, their joy is short-lived, like the spaces of these clubs which host these parties, but say, please don't linger around the party space once the party is over. We do not want to corrupt the image of this club for many other participants who come other days of the week to come dance and party and drunk. On your screen is a map which is of Delhi, which is showing a bunch of cruising spaces that are scattered around the city. Many people and the city, as we know, which are spatially segregated, where areas where working class people live and areas where workspaces are located, and people move around from one place to another using its transport arteries, most importantly, the public transport arteries, create within this map of the city a possibility to engage sexually, to mark even in specific shorter windows of ephemeral frame, a possibility where they can linger, walk around, meet some stranger, and forge intimacy. How can the city, a stale map of the city, a map of the city that is produced through capitalist movement, produced through people moving from their homes to workplaces and back, from morning till evening, possibly married, possibly having children, produce within the grammar of the city many simple nodes and parks and public toilets and cruising spaces where they feel they can meet other people and talk to them. One of the spaces is at an intersection of two important metro rail networks in the city of Delhi. And when people are changing those metro rail networks, it's also where the interstate bus terminus is located. So there are people coming from different parts of the country in and out in that node. There are people who are changing the metro rail to go from one part of the city to another part of the city. When they're going back home in the late evenings, we'll stop here. But outside that metro rail, and outside those parks and the series of public toilets where a lot of these men, trans and Koti people would engage either in sex work or simple cruising, there is a differentiation that is produced. There are queers which stand outside the metro rail gate, metro station gate, and there are queers who are practicing their desires in those public toilets. With a short distance between them, hardly 100 meters between the people at the metro gate and at the public toilet. When you ask somebody at the metro gate, queers, do you also engage in the public toilet? They say, no, these are disgusting spaces. You know what kind of people go there? They're coolies, they're working class, they're drivers, they're bus conductors, they are not the same as the ones who are standing outside the metro gate. The little distance of 100 meters between these two sets of queer imagination claiming of the city, both trying to forge intimacy and forge intimate map of the city, is a distance of caste, a hierarchy of who can be touched and who cannot be touched, what is desirable and what is not desirable. So these public toilets become this site for many who cannot afford the fanciness of those clubs that we spoke about a little while back, a possibility to meet other people every evening, trying to forge intimacy and love and life before they go back to their worlds where there's little to nothing for them in order to survive their sexuality and queerness. Many of them are migrants. Many of them have come leaving their wives behind. Many of them are trying to create future in this big city. And yet the relationship they forge to the city is mediated through this differentiation of where they come from, who they are, what social locations they embody when they're engaging with these spaces. The public toilet and the metro station gate both represent different kinds of queer aesthetics. And also, while cities are spatially segregated, tell us equally how sexuality is also spatially segregated. Who gets to desire in what forms? In one of these public toilets, once I was walking around with a friend. I was wearing this red floral shirt, which clearly made me stand apart from the space of this public toilet. I wanted to see what was happening there. Voyeuristically looking at, there's a bunch of people inside the public toilet making out, engaging into sexual intimacy, with a bunch of people waiting in the queue to enter into the space. The little public toilet would be catering to 20 people at the same time. Suddenly, while I'm watching what is happening inside, everybody starts disrupting. People start in a chaotic move, rushing outside, jumping in the nearby park, running away. I turn around to see a police constable is standing just behind me. The police who has come to surveil and make sure the sanctity of these spaces for which they have been designed are not disrupted, they're not violated, they're not corrupted. People vanish from that site. Police does not hound me because clearly it was not looking for the kind of people who are dressed like me in that space. Police thinks police is powerful here. A little while back, just 30 minutes from the time when the disruption takes place, when you go past the same space, the same public toilet is refilled with similar intimacies, as if nothing happened. The performance of people, policemen who thinks that it is his uniform that is powerful, that disrupted that space, to people who think that they could play with the system and power, the surveilling mechanism in order to claim that space, claim the city, and claim desire. It's also a story of the city. There are several parks in the city which have now, in the name of becoming fancy and beautiful, are turning into gated spaces. Gated spaces to keep away what is queer, unwanted of the city. People who gamble, people are homeless, people who would use those park benches to sleep in the night, people who do not need to belong into the global imagination of the city. A world-class city does not want poor people. A world-class city does not want drunk people. World-class city does not want working-class queer people in those spaces. So park in a central Delhi is turned, lit up, and cleansed from a site of cruising to site of familial space where sacred families can populate that space without desanctifying, without corrupting through queerness. On another end, a museum is popped up in another park, and a gate erupted saying this is not a common path, not for the desires or the many meanings that many people and across generations have built onto the spaces in order to create a claiming of the city beyond the pride parades and beyond the party spaces, in the everydayness, in the everyday movement through the cityscapes. Coming to dating apps. What dating apps, especially in the terms of geolocative dating apps, because you can move around in the city, you could be in one map right now of the city, in one part of the city, and you can be in another part of the city a little while later, and you can populate yourself in different map cities. So I can be in a working class neighborhood, which is marked through caste and communal histories. I can change my name. I can create my persona for myself through text, image, and numbers. I can also travel using the same transport arteries of the city to another part of the city and belong there, appear in the map of those city spaces, and feel that, you know, I can also be part of the South Delhi glamour and not just the neighborhood where I live, where I'm tied into my class and caste histories, and feel desirable in different ways. But when one transacts desires on these dating apps, one is continuously reminded who they are, where they come from. So somebody on a gay dating app, such as Grindr, would openly ask you, what is your caste? Who are you? Caste in this claiming of city through a dating app, which is geolocative, is still mediated through your social histories. Sexuality is everything but sexuality. Sexuality is caste, class, religion, where do you live, where do you belong, and can you really belong in these spaces? So somebody asks, are you a Dalit or a Maratha? Dalit are formerly untouchable castes, ostracized in the society, especially largely in the South Asian context, are directly asked whether you are a Dalit. Look at your skin color. Look at the aesthetics that you're carrying. You cannot be anything but else. Simultaneously, while dominant caste identities flaunt their caste locations on these dating apps, suggesting that how their caste location makes them desirable. It makes them seen, and here seen as in a hyper-masculine subjectivity, a desirable body, whereas a lower caste body, a working class body is automatically put down as an undesirable subject in the scheme of things. Who gets to be sexy in the city, even in the digital space? And what role does caste has in queerness? And what kind of queer cities and queer spaces are produced in this engagement, and who can be free? On other platforms, it would ask that only upper caste guys contact us, or only Brahmins please contact, or all our Chamar guys here. Chamar is a caste identity which is associated with lower caste people and formerly untouchables. The question becomes, is it only about sex in the making of this city? Or what are the ways in which people negotiate these locations that they embody in order to aspire and claim the city? I know so many who come from lower caste working class backgrounds who would use pseudonyms with upper caste surnames in order to pass as an upper caste queer body, who would misrepresent themselves in terms of where they live in the city and try to claim desire. If you tell them that you live in a particular neighborhood, say Valmiki colony in Trilokpuri, you automatically become undesirable. But if you tell them you live in Greater Kailash, which is a posh neighborhood where rich people live in big bungalows who have multiple cars, you're automatically sexy. So many in these dating spaces, where they move around, camouflaging from one part of the city to another, as they move around in the city for work and other purposes, claim desire, claim city, and embrace their desires and sexuality to represent self-representations based upon claiming upper caste surnames or misrepresenting themselves of where they come from, which neighborhoods they belong to. This is an area is a map, it's a grinder map, which tells us about in concentric circle, where are most of the queer people located in weekdays and weekends. This shows that how areas in South Delhi around major metro stations is where you would see a larger concentration of people on Grindr as a dating app, while you go more peripheral in the city. In order to meet the farthest person, you might have to travel farther distances compared to other areas. So the city itself then emerges in terms of access to technology, who can afford data, who can be on internet, who can perform effectively on these dating platforms and feel desirable, construct a city map for you, where certain areas pop up with heavily concentrated, visible queer population, while many other areas are scattered, symbolizing the greater socio-economic inequalities within which then queerness is lived, imagined, and survived. I would end this conversation with another story, a story of a boy that I met in one of these dancing spaces that I spoke about. He loves dancing. He feels these dancing spaces make him feel free. In an otherwise world where he lives with his family and his Muslim identity, he feels these party spaces where he can just freely dance without caring for anything else. There's freedom, even if for a short period of time, even if ephemerally granted. There are often times where he would not understand the music. And once I asked him very simply, how do you dance on this song when you don't know the song? He says, like everybody else in this party, everybody wants to claim this aesthetic, something which is being transferred from what is understood as queerness in the minoritarian imagination of the global north, but now has come to circulate in the world and diffused in particular forms where everybody wants to claim it. What I want to say is how there is simultaneous survival of so many different kinds of worlds that live not just within these idioms of global gay aesthetics, but negotiate it by maneuvering and manipulating diverse worlds and some spaces and ephemeral windows of survival in those city-making projects. This boy that I met in this gay party tells me that he once fell in love with somebody. And love is so powerful. Love allows you to be transgressive. Love is radical. He felt his world has come one. Now he feels free. Once the boy he was in love with, who was from Rajasthan, from a dominant caste background, and he being Muslim, was going home for some religious function. Sajid, this friend I met at the dance party, tells me he insisted his lover to take him along. His lover was hesitant. His lover was afraid, how will I introduce you to my family? In Indian context, in South Asian context, friendship is one idiom through which sexuality has survived for the longest period of time. Before the other idioms of homosexuality and gay and lesbian vocabulary was visible. So queer women will call each other Saheli, translated loosely as friends, or Sakhi. Or gay men will call themselves Yar and Dost. So this friend, Sajid, tells that, I can come to your house in Rajasthan as your friend. You can invite a friend over. The lover is still hesitant. He can't take any friend. Sajid says, at my home, people call me Sunny. Sunny is a neutral name. People across religious identities keep the name Sunny. So I don't need to be a Muslim person to be Sunny or a Sikh person to be Sunny. Anybody can be Sunny. So I can be your Hindu friend, Sunny from Delhi, who wants to visit your home with you. But he could not be any Sunny. He had to be a Brahmin Sunny in order to enter into this Brahmin household where this religious function was happening. When he visits with his lover to Rajasthan, he feels his world has come together. He's so confident about the love and the strength of it that he goes to the parents who live in a Muslim neighborhood in Delhi and tell them that, I am gay and I found my love. He's beaten up. He feels unwelcome in that space, but love is ever too powerful. He and his lover decide to live together in some other parts of the city. A place where they can afford living together with the meager incomes that both can collectively earn. The lover gives him a Ganesh statue of a Hindu idol. He worships the Ganesh statues too much. Sajid prays for the love that it sustains the hurdles of time in the world. But once, while Sajid was at work, the lover calls him up and says, this is over. This cannot happen. I have to go back home. My parents are forcing me to get married. This kind of love was never to sustain. This is never to happen. Sajid is heartbroken. He does not know what to do. He asks the lover to stay back at the home. He's just coming back from office. He reaches back to home to see to witness that the lover has already left for the bus station. He quickly carries the Ganesh statue of the Hindu god that was given to him, and then rushes to the bus station, reaching on a time before he's entering into the bus to go somewhere else. He says, Sajid requests the lover, please stop, please don't go. We can make something new around here. We can make a new world for us. Sajid is trying to say, for the God's sake, stop. And while he holds the lover's hand, the lover pushes him aside. The Ganesh statue that he was carrying, so lovingly gifted by the lover, falls down and breaks down into pieces of clay. Sajid tells me when he was collecting those pieces of clay, he felt the world had collapsed, not just the statue. Nowhere else to go, he goes back to the family in the Muslim neighborhood, who after hurling abuses still accept him in, but only talk to him in abusive language. Would always call him Randi, loosely translated as slut. Slut, come here and have dinner with us. Slut, what are you doing? The only time when he's entertained is in those spaces. Heavily humiliated. One day, when nobody's at home, he takes a permanent marker, and on the walls of the house, knowing very well the house does not belong to him but to his father, takes the permanent marker and writes on the walls, "Main randi hu, main randi hu, main randi hu. I am a slut, I am a slut, I am a slut, I am a slut." Sajid tells me that in that brief moment when nobody was home, knowing very well when the father comes back, he will beating him up brutally, he had claimed that house. That when the parents came, he could tell them that you like inviting your neighbors for tea. They like seeing me beaten up and hurled abuses. Why don't you invite them over and tell them a slut lives here? In that way, like Sajid claims that little house as his own, in a neighborhood where he finds himself unwelcome sometimes, in a house where he's continuously abused and brutalized, he says there's still a possibility. For so many of us who come to the city, hoping the city is going to give us possibilities in future, allow our queerness to proliferate and become fabulous, we still create within the cityscape those possibilities to survive our queerness, to survive our lives. I'll end the presentation with a short poem, thinking about what about all of us who are at the periphery, who are often fall short in terms of numbers because we can't show up in pride parades, because we can't show up on these fancy parties, because the drinks are expensive and the cover charges are expensive. This poem to end and bring it together. The politics of numbers, of visibility, who can be visible and who cannot be visible, and what kind of queerness is seen and visible in the city. Yet again today, you pulled me down through numbers. Yet again today, you pulled me down through numbers. You choked my throat and silenced me like every other time with names that did not resonate, I could not relate to, but which told me, rather reminded me, that I do not belong here. In the spaces which are otherwise inhabit daily, or the bodies which are otherwise inhabit. Till the time I can also produce with me an army of numbers, like the ones that walk the streets as if they own them. Forgetful of what and why gives them this visibility, this power to tell me that I will never have him, or do I even need them? So that's it, isn't it? So that's it, isn't it? Till then, let the norm have the last laugh. Why don't I just fuck off? Yet again today, Yet again today, like every other day, you walked over me, my bodies, our bodies, visible bodies, invisibilized bodies, dead, alive. How does it matter? Matters is your walk. Matters is your walk that overlooks my kind like a voyeur does. Such is the privilege of distance, my friend. You won't understand. Just tail and nibs of your rainbow feathers. What about us? You call your intimate, but others. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Darren. Wow. I'm feeling so many emotions at the moment from your incredibly rich and engaging talk. So thank you so much. I think that really speaks to your gifts as a storyteller and an orator and speaker. Like I'm wowed, truly. So thank you. There's so much that I want to ask you about here, and I can see that the Q&A is also quickly filling up. So I'm going to start with one question that we are kind of grappling with within the series. It's a more general question, and I'll go into some more specific ones about your talk. But I guess our question is, thinking about queer lives and experiences and the various ways in which you deploy the term queer, in your talk and in much of your writing. Our question for you is, what would it mean for you to queer urbanism? What does it mean to queer urbanism? And within this, what would you prioritize and why?
If queer is really about transgressing, it's really about radicalizing our life worlds. It's reimagining our worlds. For the many people who come to the city or are trying to claim the city, we need to. For me, queerness is then a queer urbanism is then a hopeful engagement. It's a hopeful engagement of rebuilding and reimagining. Like those many people who imagine on a park bench or a public toilet a possibility to become a dressing room just before the Pride Parade, or where you could on a protest site see a simultaneous engagement of people who are protesting Islamophobic like killing of a young child in a train, who enter and participate in a queer celebration that is happening simultaneously. When all of these political movements can engage and speak with each other, is where I feel queer urbanism is possible. To think about that migrants walking miles and miles to go back home is only about a class issue and not also about gender and sexuality, is then to take it away from it, to think about that our everyday practice of the city making, of just going to work or coming back from work, is only within the neoliberal logic, but not through our engagement of our bodies. Then we are missing on the part that how even the slightest thing that we are doing by our very presence in those spaces where we have been historically denied or we are not allowed to be present, we are queering that space. The communities that I come from, many of us don't survive higher education. Most of them are killed by the university system. And yet, we're still hopeful of a change, revisit and keep coming to the university, keep claiming those spaces, hoping that what was promised in terms of queerness, a potential which is not status quoist, which is not normativizing, but revolutionizing, is possible.
Darren, on that note, can I ask a follow-up question in terms of spaces of hope that you've seen kind of emerging within the city? And I think a lot of the stories that you tell speak to the tensions and antagonisms in different kind of social groups and identities within the queer space of Delhi. Do you see any spaces coming up through these peripheries or elsewhere that kind of embody allyship and hope and the coming together and this contestation of othering that's existing within queer spaces?
What I feel is while we are on the bandwagon of visibility politics, where what is visible is what is there, and who can afford that visibility, miss out on so many of different kinds of claiming and making of the city, which cannot afford to be visible. for whom to be visible itself means death. So while we might cherish what I started with, celebrating a pride parade, where people can also celebrate the Supreme Court judgment that has come around the law. There are many people who cannot engage in a similar fashion with law or the prides in that visibility. Even if in the era of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, EDI framework, where all the corporate houses are employing more queer people and giving them jobs, we need to also understand those workspaces are also hierarchically made. Not everybody in that space, in the name of visibility, will be given rights. It is only going to be the top tier of the higher end earning members. But the ones who are still informally employed within that workspace, the one which come from particular caste, class, location, might be denied their queer identity because they do not speak about queerness in the similar fashion, in the way in which the language of equality, diversity, and inclusion understands. And therefore, one needs to also see about, can we then simultaneously posit, while celebrating this new change that we are witnessing right now, as our more and more spaces are being diverse, that can a language of queerness can also diversify and not limit itself to this identitarian framework. India has such a rich history of queerness, which cannot be neatly coded into it. But when forced to codify into these frameworks, they lose a lot about what makes them queer. A lot of people who go to dancing in these gay parties, who do not understand that music, but still want to belong there, are negotiating the way in which they can survive whatever is available. Yeah. We thought that when we came to the city, we'll find our desires, but cities have also done something significantly to our desires.
Thank you so much, Darren. I'm going to move now to the audience Q&A. I'm going to state a couple of questions and you can engage with whichever ones you can in the time that we have. We have a question on cruising and like cruising practices in Delhi, just to ask about like, does that happen? Is it part of gay culture? I think you've spoken a bit to that in your talk. Another question which connects with some of what you were just saying, thinking through whether the kind of gentrification of gay space and the kind of taking over of queer spaces by heterosexual people, is that something that you can see a trend of in Delhi? Maybe we start with those two to start.
To start with the second question that you just raised, unlike the way in which you understand gay spaces in global north, where neighborhoods are there, which become this areas. You go to like Los Angeles and there's West Hollywood. You go to San Francisco and there's Castro Street. You go to London, there's Soho, right? And these areas then try to create a larger imagination within the city's map making, that these are the areas where you can be queer. There are gay parties happening there. There are gay clubs there. Like queer clubs of different variety, catering to different worldviews, right? You go to Brighton and Camptown and this is the gay village. Now, similar kind of imaginations cannot be neatly transported and replicated in other context where sexuality is not so lived in those language of visibility. Right? You can't have a designated area which you would call this is a gay bar. So when I'm talking about gay parties, I was saying that, these are club spaces which can be anywhere in the city, mostly in South and Central Delhi. But that doesn't mean that the gay party always happens in that club every Saturday, right? They shift, they move around, and that maneuvering is necessary for its survival. Right? The fixity might be a death sentence to most of these spaces.
Yeah. So it depends on its transience in that way.
Yeah, and that's why I talked about ephemerality. Like, it is this production of ephemeral spaces, and in that ephemerality, a possibility that is imagined that I can be queer, I can dance tonight, right? Yeah. And draw meaning onto that space. Next Saturday, there might not be a party in that same club, but I might feel if I'm passing by, this is a friendly place.
Yeah,
it can't afford to be called a gay bar.
Yeah. Darren, thank you so much. I'm mindful of the time, and I know we all have many more questions to ask that will have to remain unanswered for now. But I think your talk just raises so many important issues about like identity, about power, about hierarchies, about the role of infrastructure in the built environment and navigating and also reinforcing a lot of these exclusions and opportunities and hope. So thank you for such a rich rich discussion and conversation. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to everyone else. I'm going to pass over to Claire, who's going to give some final comments and speak about our next session. Claire?
Thanks, Jordana. Thanks, Darren. It was such a pleasure to hear you speak. I can really hear the poet in you as well. And as always with these events, I'm left wanting more time to hear you and to ask more questions. But thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to the audience for attending. We've got a couple of related events coming up. The first is with Ben Campkin. It's his inaugural lecture happening on March 16th at 6 p.m. GMT, which will examine the transportive qualities and local global dynamics of London's queer infrastructures over the last 40 years. And I know that a link will be dropped into the chat shortly, or has been done already. The second event is related to our Queering Urbanism series, and this will be on in early June, date to be confirmed, and we'll share this very soon. But it's on the topic of queer futurity, which will be a conversation between Tim Waterman, Elspeth Probyn, and Sarah Ensor. And so this will explore queer futurity through the lens of spatial and environmental imaginaries. So a really exciting topic as well. The date for this event will be shared when we share the recording as well. So hopefully we'll be with you soon to register. Just to say again, Darren, thank you so much. I hope we can speak again and perhaps have more events like this in the future. And thank you all for attending. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Darren.